So obviously the Jockey Club knew what they were doing. They created this program's format because properly we go from nutraceuticals to proper nutrition and balanced feed programs. This will be presented by Dr. Robert Coleman, Assistant Professor, Equine Extension, and Dr. Lori Lawrence, Provost Distinguished Service Professor, Department of Animal and Food Sciences, both from the University of Kentucky. Please welcome them both.
Thank you, and also thank you to the organizers for the kind invitation to come to this. It is a little embarrassing to realize it's been going on for 7 years, and it's one of those things that here in central Kentucky, we know things about horses go on. What goes on, sometimes I'm not so sure that we are as educated as we should be. So certainly from this morning, it's been very educational. I'm going to start off this sort of joint presentation to talk about some of the basic things relative to feeding horses. And I think it's one of those topics that often we just do it because we do it. Do we always think about what we do? And I think following Dr. McElraith in his conversation about nutraceuticals and why we take joint supplements because we think they work. I think actually we take them because we hope they work. But from feeding the racehorse, I think we always have to stop and think, so what do they need? What are the nutrients that are most critical to looking after this horse? And then, while it might seem really simple, how do we supply them? Well, we feed hay and oats, or we feed whatever we feed, and that's because we're supposed to. And where does some of that come from? I think in times there are some traditions that maybe we need to evaluate. That's not to say that traditions are not appropriate, but I think we need to think about them and where did they come from and why. So very simply, and all horses need this. This isn't just because they're race horses, it's because they're horses. Certainly water, and I think we do a good job of taking care of that. I always find it interesting when you hear after a big race and the winner of the race talks about the next morning about, well, he cleaned up all his feed. And I always wonder, so did he drink all the water too? What did he clean up? What did we look at? So we need to think about that, but generally that's an easy one. But from a feeding standpoint, we need to think about energy and calories, and I think we need to think about the sources of those calories, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Crude protein, or the amino acids that the horse requires, and generally, crude protein is something that for a long time we've always thought about being almost the most important. Oh, it's a great feed because look at how high the protein level is. Well, just because it's high, does that mean that that's what's necessary, or that's because it's the way we have adopted things? And then certainly the minerals and the vitamins, which can be a little bit disquieting because there's a host of them. You know, we're thinking about major minerals and trace minerals and how much do they need and where does it come from? What are the best sources? The same with vitamins, and I think a lot of times, sometimes we think about vitamins as necessary, but why? I think there's a lot of times and there's a lot of things that we see from a personal standpoint. Some of the ads have gone away, but every now and then we have those wonderful ads. I appreciate the ones for the older male and the specific vitamins that I am supposed to take. No, I don't, but there's a lot of people do because maybe I think my diet is balanced. I'm not sure that it is or it isn't, but if we think about it from the working horse, and one of the things that's always a challenge that I run into, and I talk to people about what their horses do for a living, and yes, race horses, yeah, they work pretty hard. But a lot of people out there that have horses that might be a little closer to that maintenance category that would be a glorified lawn ornament, actually get fed like race horses. And it's like, They're not working that hard. And at times it's even hard to compartmentalize, where do I put that horse in relationship to his intensity? When I'm starting that 2-year-old that we're training, that young horse, his intensity is not quite at the same level as the one that's ready to go to the races. So not only do his calorie needs change, but his calorie needs change as his intensity starts to change. And so we've tried to compartmentalize that, and this is what NRC has done for us to sort of get a handle on what it is. And then just to add to that is sort of like, what does that look like from a work standpoint? And again, it gives us a place to start, not a place to end. And in a lot of cases, I think people look at that and say, particularly the one at the bottom for intense work, 12 hours a week, that's a lot of work. That would be for maybe more your endurance horse. I'm not sure that our race horses are going out and working anywhere near that level. I'm not sure the exercise riders, and after we heard earlier today, how much you have to get done between 6 and 11. Oh my goodness, there isn't 12 hours to do that. So how do we put it together? Do we really think about how hard they are working? And so if we think about it from how those change, and these are all the nutrient requirements. Certainly calories tend to be the one that we can focus on and the one we balance for first, but that lower level work, not a lot of extra energy required, not a lot of extra protein or minerals or vitamins to meet those requirements, and we can do that fairly simply. As we get up into those higher levels where we get into the race horses, a big challenge. The other thing I think we have to think about is if we look at the two categories kind of in the middle between lower and higher, where we've got our dressage horse and our event horse, not only do we have to think about what the total requirement is that changes. Yeah, they need more calories, but what do we need to supply, or how do we supply those calories? We heard early on about the oxygen in muscle. Well, not only is that oxygen going there to help the muscle work and create energy for work, but the substrate that it's going to work with is going to be quite a bit different. So if I have an intense worked horse, but it's not immediately from an intense standpoint, I might be able to use something that uses that aerobic metabolism. I'm going to take advantage of all that oxygen. But if I have that horse that's sprinting, I can't wait for metabolism. I can't wait for the oxygen to get there. I need those muscles to respond quickly, and when the horse is angled out or asked to now go through that hole, we don't have time. We don't have the muscle time to say, oh, well, you've got another, it has to be immediate. And so therefore, the energy source for that immediate response is going to be different. And so that's going to change how we select to meet those requirements. So when we're going to meet the requirements, we're still going to have to rely on our forage component. And I was glad to hear Mr. Kasner talk about, that we still have to take care of that, and we do have to appreciate that forage is going to be a part of the diet. And for our performance horses in this part of the world, what's it going to be? It's going to be hay, and it needs to be clean hay. And maybe we'll find some concentrate depending on the quality of the hay and the level of activity. As we go up, we're still going to have good forage. It still has to do something because our horse doesn't have time to process everything. There are limits, and so we're going to feed some more concentrate in order to meet the requirements. And again, those concentrates are going to be different. So from a nutrient standpoint, the forage is hay. Our commercial concentrates, we'll talk a little bit about that. Are there some additional supplemental feeds we might use? In some cases, we've talked a lot relative to horses on how do we use fats and oils, some of the other supplements that we might want to add, but I think we have to look at the basics first. So quality hay. Thanks, Mr. Kasner, to lead into my first point under hay. It's got to be free of dust and mold. It has to be. And we all know that. But do we always practice it? I've had people say, it's okay, it's just a little bit moldy. The only little bit that works is 0. After that, and like Mr. Kasner, I'm pretty good at testing moldy hay. I might actually do that as a second career because I do get an allergic reaction. It doesn't take very long. The only problem is when you can't breathe, it's sort of a little bit disastrous. I want hay to be of good nutrient quality, and I want them to eat it. I don't want them to leave it on the ground. I want them to be like Mr. Kastner's horse. I want them cleaning it up. It has to be consumed. And then when we look at concentrates, and one of the things I think from an industry we're pretty fortunate is we have a great commercial feed industry. There are lots of choices, and there are people that are developing very good commercial feeds that are formulated for performance horses. They're taking advantage of current research and putting together a package that has the nutrients your horses require in an appropriate way if you do one small thing. Follow the directions. They are there for a reason. Oh, I'm going to feed this feed because it's really good, but I'm going to cut it with oats because that's what we've always done. All of a sudden now, what have you done? You've changed the nutrient profile of what you fed. And so if it doesn't work, and having had some experience in the feed industry many years ago, if it doesn't work, it is the feed's fault. Not anybody else, it's the feed. It didn't work, it didn't do what you wanted to, but they are cereal-based, so they're going to supply some of those calories that we need, and they are fortified. They do have the minerals and the vitamins, and if you look at it from meeting the requirements and following the directions, I think you can be reasonably well off. But the bottom line is to think about what you're putting in front of the horse. What's the hay supplying, and what's that concentrate supplying? And am I doing it according to the way that those feeds were designed to be used? How much are they going to eat? And that's always a big issue. And a lot of times we feed things free choice, or that's what we think it is. They clean up everything, so it must be free choice. Well, if you're only giving them 2 flakes of hay twice a day, and they want 3 twice a day, then that's not free choice. Free choice is like when you go to the buffet. That is free choice. We're going to add some concentrate, and we're certainly going to have much higher intakes when we do this. And I know Dr. Lawrence will add to some of this, but if we think about, again, how much does it take to meet their requirements? You know, we talk a lot of times 2.5% to 3% of body weight, but again, depending on the kind of hay that you're feeding and the concentrate that you're feeding, this is what it takes. So that horse at light work, an 1,100-pound horse, 16 pounds is about 1.5% of body weight, roughly. It doesn't take a lot of extra concentrate, but when we get to that intensely worked horse, that's really putting out a lot. That's a lot of concentrate. And the other thing we need to think about is how often are we now feeding them? Because we have to make sure that we don't overload the system, that we give the horse an appropriate amount of time to eat, digest, and still get the work done. And when you think about what their day looks like, there's times it's intense, but there's a lot of time that it's not. So do we need to spread some things out so that they have something to do that aids in their digestion? But we need to really be planning and concentrate on what it is that we need to get done. And so our goal is to balance what the horses are doing and the nutrients that are being supplied by the feeds that you want to. And I always think about, well, you know, should I put up a slide that said, here's what the ideal hay is? I have no idea what that looks like other than it's free of dust and mold, has a nutrient profile that's useful, and that the horses will eat it. After that, all bets are off. Because what we might get in one part of the country, in one part of the state, from here to, you know, Lexington to Churchill, could be all over the map, and it makes it pretty hard to come up with that. Then you get to pick your concentrate. And again, we have lots that are available that I think are high quality, and you just have to follow the directions. And I think we're going to leave the questions to the very end.